Field Report number 7842, Cycle 19. Subject species, Homo sapiens. Observed congregation within a warehouse-scale enclosure labeled Costco. Individuals maneuver oversized wheeled platforms, accumulating identical items in quantities exceeding immediate consumption thresholds. Movement patterns form slow, looping currents, punctuated by abrupt halts at sample distribution nodes, where free microportions induce prolonged queuing behavior. Subjects display reduced aversion to spatial compression and contact. Economic exchange appears incentivized by bulk pricing, though storage capacity constraints are disregarded. Hypothesis: perceived future scarcity or social validation drives surplus acquisition. Functional rationale remains unconfirmed. Humans voluntarily enter a large warehouse to acquire items in quantities far exceeding immediate consumption needs. The structure, identified as Costco, appears to function not as a simple distribution center, but as a ceremonial environment in which excess is not only permitted but encouraged. Individuals navigate wide aisles filled with towering stacks of identical goods, often selecting units that could sustain a small colony for multiple cycles. Central Command initially hypothesized that these humans were preparing for environmental collapse, yet observations show that this behavior persists even in stable conditions. A single unit will procure, for example, 48 rolls of paper or an entire crate of perishable fruit, despite possessing limited storage capacity within their domestic habitats. This results in secondary behaviors, such as reorganizing living spaces or consuming items at accelerated rates to justify the acquisition. In contrast, our species distributes resources in precisely measured portions calibrated to metabolic demand, thereby eliminating surplus-related inefficiencies. Humans, however, appear to derive psychological satisfaction from the mere presence of abundance, independent of practical necessity. The Council remains uncertain whether this behavior is rooted in ancient scarcity trauma or simply an evolved preference for visual confirmation of resource security. Notably, individuals often transport these excessive goods using oversized wheeled containers, further reinforcing the ritualistic nature of accumulation. The act concludes with a transactional exchange that seems almost secondary to the experience of gathering itself. Humans exhibit collective patience while navigating congested pathways with oversized carts, forming slow-moving clusters without apparent distress. Within the Costco environment, mobility is significantly impaired by the widespread use of large wheeled carriers, which frequently collide or obstruct one another. Despite this inefficiency, humans rarely abandon the process. Instead, they engage in a synchronized pattern of stopping, waiting, and subtly maneuvering around obstacles. Central Command notes that in most other contexts, such density would trigger agitation or territorial displays. Yet here the population maintains a subdued tolerance. Some individuals even pause mid-pathway to inspect goods or communicate with companions, creating temporary blockages that others accept with minimal protest. This suggests the presence of an unspoken social contract unique to this setting, wherein inconvenience is normalized as part of the ritual. Comparatively, our species employs instantaneous spatial reconfiguration to avoid such congestion, rendering physical obstruction obsolete. Humans, however, appear to interpret these delays as an expected component of the experience, possibly enhancing the perceived value of the acquired goods. The Council is particularly intrigued by the phenomenon of cart drift, in which unattended carriers slowly migrate into shared pathways, further complicating navigation. Rather than correcting these inefficiencies through systemic redesign, humans adapt behaviorally, reinforcing the notion that the ritual itself supersedes logical optimization. Humans engage in opportunistic consumption of free samples, treating small food offerings as integral to the bulk acquisition process. Throughout the Costco environment, designated stations distribute miniature portions of various consumables, which humans approach with notable enthusiasm. These samples are often consumed immediately, with individuals sometimes circling back to the same station multiple times under the assumption of anonymity. Central Command initially classified this as a nutritional supplement behavior. However, the caloric contribution is negligible relative to the quantities purchased. Instead, the activity appears to serve as both entertainment and decision-making aid, allowing humans to justify future bulk acquisition based on minimal sensory input. The Council finds it perplexing that a single bite is considered sufficient evidence to commit to a multi-unit purchase capable of lasting several temporal cycles. Additionally, social dynamics emerge as humans form brief queues for these samples, demonstrating a willingness to wait for a fragment of food despite possessing carts filled with provisions. In our species, evaluation of consumables is conducted through comprehensive molecular analysis prior to acquisition, eliminating uncertainty and the need for repeated tasting rituals. Humans, by contrast, rely on immediate sensory gratification and social cues, often influenced by the presence of other participants. This behavior reinforces the hypothesis that the Costco ritual is not purely transactional, but includes elements of communal experience and low-stakes foraging simulation, providing psychological enrichment beyond the practical goal of resource procurement.